55 women had their lives changed forever due to the actions of one doctor. What he did was illegal and immoral, but why didn't the medical authorities stop him? Even though most doctors are professional and diligent, they don't care as much as people think, and some knowingly cause harm. Hi, I'm Peter. I used to be a doctor. I researched this doctor's history and also used my knowledge and experience to give you facts and insights into the medical profession that you won't find anywhere else. This is the story of a member of a medical specialty that's well known to practice illegal behaviour. First, a little background information that will make the story clearer. Opium, opiates and opioids, they all work by attaching to opiate receptors in the brain. Opium is a lightly refined sap from the opium poppy that can be eaten or smoked. Opiates are extracted from opium, such as morphine and heroin. Opioids include the previous medications, but also include synthetics like oxycodone and fentanyl. Opium has been used for a very long time. It was first mentioned in texts from the Sumerian civilization 4,000 years ago, where it was referred to as the joy plant. Eventually, in the 1800s, it was industrially refined to create injectable morphine, which was when its use really took off. The use of morphine in the 1800s and early 1900s wasn't just by patients. Doctors used it often as well. There were many claims by experts of the time of heavy morphine use by doctors and even by their wives. For example, a German medication specialist reported that 40% of doctors were morphine addicts and 10% of doctors' wives were addicts as well. It's been found in questionable self-reported studies that doctors have slightly lower rates of illegal drug use than the general population. However, doctors have long been known as significant users of prescription medications due to easy access. The most often abused prescription medications are sedatives and opioids, with the medication that's used varying by specialization. Psychiatrists favour sedatives such as Valium and Xanax, and anaesthetists favour opioids such as morphine and fentanyl. The only excessive use of illegal drugs is marijuana amongst emergency department doctors, and female doctors go completely legal by demonstrating alcohol abuse rates around 3.5 times the rate of the general population. But with so much specialisation in the medical profession these days, you're probably asking, which doctors use the most drugs? And the answer is anaesthetists or anaesthesiologists if you're in the USA. They're the doctors who are primarily known to keep patients unconscious during surgeries, but they also practice pain relief and sedation for minor procedures. They're the most likely to end up as addicts because everything they do involves administering some kind of medication, and in many cases, temptation gets the better of them. The anaesthetist James Peters was addicted to the use of intravenous opioids, and because of that, 55 women had their lives irreversibly altered. In Melbourne, Australia, in the state of Victoria, between 2008 and 2009, Dr. James Peters worked to anaesthetise women for their abortions. He was also working under strict conditions imposed by the medical board. If we go back 13 years from this time period to the year 1995, we see that James Peters was charged by police for forging prescriptions for himself and his wife for the synthetic opioid pethidine, also known as Demerol, a medication that was widely used at the time, but has since largely fallen out of use. When a doctor is charged with a crime, police have to notify the medical board, which they promptly did. In the medical board hearing, Peters admitted that he was addicted to intravenous use of opioids. Peters' medical registration was suspended for 12 months in 1996, But then in 1997, the medical board reinstated his medical registration and allowed him to begin work again at the Box Hill Hospital in Melbourne. He was placed in a program for drug-addicted anaesthetists. Yes, anaesthetists take so many drugs, an entire program for them is necessary. And this program included regular supervision and random drug testing for common illegal and pharmaceutical drugs. But beginning in 2000, hospital staff raised concerns about Peter's loitering around medication trolleys and vials of fentanyl going missing. His random drug tests didn't indicate that he had used anything prohibited, so he continued working at the hospital, and 4 years later, in 2004, he was hired by the Croydon Day Surgery despite his history, where he continued to work for several years. In 2010, the alarm was raised when health authorities in Victoria identified a cluster of young women, all with hepatitis C, that was caused by the same strain of virus, meaning that it likely came from the same source or sources that are closely affiliated. Further investigation by the health authorities uncovered more cases of hepatitis C, so that eventually 55 young women were found to be infected by an identical strain of the virus. A serious and common complication of intravenous drug use is infection with the hepatitis C virus. It's highly contagious and infects the liver, and over the long term may result in liver cirrhosis or liver cancer. It's also what's termed a notifiable disease in all industrialised countries, which means when someone is found to be infected with it, a central authority must be notified so those who are infected can be prevented from spreading it to more people. So who infected these women with hepatitis C? If we go back in time again, from 2010, we see another problem with James Peters. He'd been found to be infected with hepatitis C 13 years earlier, in 1997. The Victorian Health Authority was duly notified after he first tested positive. However, the Health Authority hadn't seen fit to notify the medical board, even though it was required to do so by state law. So in 2010, it came as no surprise that genetic testing on the strain of hepatitis C infecting James Peters was found to be identical to the strain infecting the cluster of young women. But the question remained, how did Peters infect 55 women with hepatitis C in an operating theatre without anyone noticing? Well, he used a trick many addicted anaesthetists use. He would pick up a syringe containing fentanyl. He would quickly give himself a small injection and then, using the same syringe and needle, inject the patient. Due to the highly infectious nature of the hepatitis C virus, there was a good chance it would infect the victim as well. Peters knew he had hepatitis C, and as a doctor he would have been well aware of how highly contagious and potentially damaging it is to a person's body. But he continued injecting himself and his patients regardless. But if James Peters was subject to random drug testing for years, how did he continue to use fentanyl undetected? The problem was that the staff at the medical board had ordered the standard drug testing for James Peters that was ordered for any doctor subject to testing procedures. This test detects the most common illegal drugs, such as marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, and others. It also detects common pharmaceuticals that are subject to abuse, such as Valium, Xanax, morphine, and others. The problem was that the drug test didn't test for fentanyl, the drug that James Peters was addicted to. This meant that despite regular drug testing, he was able to continue using fentanyl whenever he wanted for 10 years. The young women who were infected faced an uncertain future. Infection with hepatitis C is a long-term and even lifelong danger. There are pharmaceutical treatments that aim to eradicate the virus from the patient's body, and if that can't be achieved, the treatment should hopefully keep the virus in check and slow its negative effects and serious complications. The young women he infected won't know if they're safe from developing cirrhosis or liver cancer until 2050, when it can be safely assumed that the long-term effects of the virus haven't caused more serious complications. In May 2011, police charged Peters with conduct endangering life, negligently causing serious injury, and recklessly causing serious injury. In 2013, he was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 14 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 10 years. No information on his release or refusal of parole can be found, which in Victoria likely means that he was paroled in 2023. The infected women launched a class action lawsuit against Croydon Day Surgery, as well as the head of the surgery who hired James Peters as an anaesthetist, and also the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency, which is the regulatory body that oversees the medical board. In 2014, a settlement was reached with the women receiving a total of $13.75 million. The women also wanted James Peters to pay compensation, and later in 2014 he agreed to pay $300,000. Of course, this could have been prevented if the medical board and the Victorian Health Authority weren't so incompetent. However, it bears considering that right now there are many doctors working in hospitals and private practice while under the influence of drugs or alcohol, who won't be detected until a serious event happens to one or more of their patients, or to themselves. In medicine, if a serious event occurs to a patient, such as a major mistake or death, the doctor isn't drug tested or alcohol tested immediately after the event, like a driver would be after a serious car accident. So even if there are doctors killing patients, they won't be found out until some time later, if they're detected at all. The danger of impaired doctors could be greatly mitigated if medical authorities instituted mandatory random drug screening for all doctors, like that imposed on airline pilots, bus and train drivers, mine and winery workers, and even forklift drivers. The fact that people can have more faith in the sobriety of their local forklift driver than of their local doctor is obviously farcical. If you suspect that a doctor has committed criminal or immoral acts, you should report them to the medical board. In Australia, head to the website of the Australian Health Practitioner Regulation Agency at ahpra.gov.au and click on Concerns about Practitioners. And if you'd like to check if a doctor you're seeing has had previous action taken against them, or if they're currently subject to conditions on their registration, such as drug testing, again, go to ahpra.gov.au and click on Register of Practitioners. Thanks for watching. See you next time.